Hi, I told you I would go live with my mom's birthday celebration. Of course, I got completely and totally flustered as I was planning it. I was like, keep it simple. And then I started losing things and not sure what we got all kind of worked up, guys. You know how the day my mom we did her going home celebration, it was just I was just kind of numb, but I wanted to tell you about my mom. And so, anyway, her name was Margaret Johnson, and I'm going to read her obituary so you would know her. Let's see. Okay, I want to make sure Isaiah, I can see my mom. Okay, it says Margaret Johnson was born December 7, 1927, in Chicago, Illinois, to Bertha McCrae. She was the eldest of brother William and sister Shirley, who preceded her in death. At an early age, her siblings gave her the name Little Mama because she was in charge of their safety. Margaret was raised in Morgan Park. She went to Shoup Elementary School and later graduated from Morgan Park High. During her teen years, she and her cousin formed a gospel group called the Reed Singers. The group traveled to churches throughout Chicago, with Margaret often standing in the spotlight as soloist. Maybe that's where I got my singing ability. Oh no, my mother sounded a lot better, but over the years it got kind of rusty. So maybe I was doing the latter years. But anyway, um, after high school, she went to work at Spiegel's catalog and took a few night courses before she fell in and met my dad, John Johnson. They married January  15, 1949. Together they had two children, Venice and Sheila. Look, I was born exactly 9 months to the month of the year that they got married. So they didn't get to know each other at all. 9 months later, here I come. Um, Margaret and John instilled in their children the need for God and the right way to live. John died in 1974 at the age of 50. From the late 60s until 1995, Margaret worked as a nursing aide for the All American Nursing Home in Chicago. When she retired, she continued to help and raise her grandchildren, Jeremy and Cordy. On Friday, January 17, 2003, she collapsed in her garage and was pronounced dead on Sunday, January 19, 2003. She was 75 years old. She would have been 90 today. 90. She'd have been 91. No, 91. Thanks, Isaiah. She'd have been 91. Um, Her physical presence will be missed, but Margaret accepted Christ as a child and lived her beliefs until the moment she died. She is with God now in a happy place. Those left to remember her are her daughters, Venice and Sheila, grandchildren Jeremy and Corden, cousins George Reed, and the Grant family. Her friends, Francis Falconer and Mary Lewis, and other friends from around the world. Um, Margaret Johnson lived a life punctuated by service to God and people. I believe, I believe I was born to hold other people up and pray for them and help in whatever way I can. That's why God put me here. She understood the silent pain of fatherless children, abused women, and families in crisis. Moved with compassion, she prayed daily, working from a list of names that were decades old. She was shy, introspective, not much for big gatherings. We didn't even have a funeral for my mom. We had a memorial service. My mom was cremated. Um, and so I knew, imagine going to my mother's funeral, and she was very shy. So I was like, no, a whole bunch of people looking into the casket. That wouldn't have made my mother comfortable. So I decided that she would be cremated and that we would all celebrate her. We had Ella Fitzgerald's music. Ella Fitzgerald did gospel. I didn't know that. That was an amazing um, uh, rendition of some gospel songs. And we played Mahalia Jackson, and my friend Roz Ellington and Francis Falconer read scripture. Roz sang, Connie Draper sang, what's the song? If I gain any praise, let it go to God be the glory. And His Eye is on the Sparrow was her favorite song. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows fall? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven, my home, when Jesus is my portion? A constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow. I know He watches me. She lived by that. Perhaps the most thrilling family find has been the discovery of years of her personal thoughts written in journals, on slips of paper, in notebooks, and on the back of envelopes. One day, the Lord impressed her to write words of encouragement. Each month, someone got a card, a letter, a word of encouragement to help them make it through the day. She was a gift. She was a prayer warrior whose prayers continue to echo in the cathedral of heaven. I'm going to read what my sister wrote. She wasn't able to get off work real quick. I mean, mom has been gone for a while. But my sister wrote this, and my sister's very camera shy, so I think this was really good, what my sister had to say about my mom. She says, my sister Sheila, this is my baby sister, okay? My baby sister. She says, Happy birthday, Mom. I love you and miss you. You were a light that shined in darkness. You were ahead of your time. You loved unconditionally. I understand now what a blessing and miracle you were in my life. All your prayers, meditations, sacrifices, and fasting for family, friends, and strangers. You were a prayer warrior. You believe and has had faith in God at all times. What a teachable gift you left for me. You taught me to pray and read my Bible, build a relationship with Christ, listen for God to guide me in the direction He wants me to go. I feel your presence every day. You are gone, but not far away. That was my sister. Let me tell you about my mom, how cool she was. My mom, when my dad left us when I was 14, my mom went out and got a job at a Vienna hot dog stand. Baby boomers will know the Vienna hot dog stand, where it was a building, and then they had, what do you call it, a cardboard structure, and the person would be out in the elements with shielded by wood. And my mom used to serve hot dogs and Polish and French fries and chili and all those onions and whatever. And I remember when my mom first got that job, I think it was like 1963 or 64. When my mom first got that job, oh, we were so happy. Mama came home smelling like Vienna hot dog, and it was so wonderful. It was like wow. And then we would get like, oh, we could have a hot dog and hamburger, whatever. Let me tell you, after a while, Mama worked at that job for 3 years. You knew when she was home. It's like, oh my God, Mama's home. When we get on the bus, people could smell it. People would turn around and say, somebody got a Polish. That's because it was in my mother's skin. She would work double shifts. Sometimes she would work uh 12 to 18-hour days. I mean, literally, she worked. Do you hear me? My mom worked so she could take care of us. And so after a while, those things happen to kind of be what do you call it, crime connected. So my mom was like, I'm a Christian. I have no business working here. If they're laundering stuff, I don't need to be a part of it. And so my mom was making nice money, but my mom said, God doesn't want me to work without integrity. And she didn't. She left that job where the man told her, don't leave, Margaret. We'll pay you more. We'll pay you double. And she said, no, you've been very nice to me, but I need to go. And, we know like those soup kitchens were covers for all that. I don't know all the particulars. My mother didn't either. My mother always felt that she had to be straight and honest, and she meant that. My mom didn't play. My mama didn't take notebooks and ink pens. She didn't steal. My mother brought stuff to work. She gave to work. I mean, she didn't believe in it. She didn't believe in getting caught doing stuff like that. But she didn't even think about it. She was just amazing. And I remember when my dad left, my dad told my mother, "Oh yeah, she gonna be just like these other whores on the street. She's gonna get knocked up and have babies off on her hip, and you're gonna be the laughing joke of everything." And my mother was so paranoid; she was freaking out all the time. She was worried that my dad's prophecy would come true. And she would go, oh my God, oh my God. So she was always watching me. She would open up my mail whenever somebody sent me something. My mother looked at, and then she went through the drawers into my house. She looked under my little teen magazines and look in the cover of my Beatle records. I mean, my mom was like, she was like a cop, okay? And one day, she was telling me once again, because she always had these stories. Her and my grandmother would wake me up in the morning. You sleep, and all of a sudden you open your eyes, and they're looking. Another girl got pregnant. I'm like, excuse me? Another girl got pregnant. And that man, he was a married man, and he was like, and you go, oh, I'm so sick of this. And so one day I told her, I said, look, maybe she loved the man or whatever. My mother, it was a Sunday, and my mom was going in, she had gone in the bathroom, and she was washing up, and she heard me say, maybe it's love or whatever. We don't really know. My mom comes flying out of the bathroom looking hysterical. She got this washcloth and she's swinging and she says, what have you done? What have you done? Oh my God, what have you done? And so I'm like looking at her like, hello, what's going on? She said, oh my God, what have you done? Tell me, maybe it's not too late. I'm like, maybe it's not too late. What is she talking about? And then it occurred to me that my mother was screaming because she thought that I was confessing somehow that I had been having sex with a married man or something. And I was living out what my father said. And she said, tell me, maybe it's not too late. Maybe it's not too late. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I realized, oh, she's thinking, oh, no. And I started crying. What I started crying for? When you start crying, your mama really gets worked up. And she said, oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God. And I looked at her and I was crying. And then all of a sudden, I was like, I started laughing. I said, this is ridiculous. I ain't even kissed nobody. And here my mama is thinking I'm pregnant. And I started laughing and I started laughing. And my mom kind of looked stunned and she was like, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "You." I said, "Look at your face. Oh my God. Look at your face. It's all crazy." And I said, "Mom, I haven't been with no man. I ain't been with no boy. I ain't kissed nobody. I ain't messed with nobody." And I said, "Mom, you think I don't know what you do? You think I don't care about what you do?" I said, "Mom, I watch you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go out and stand at the bus stop. I watch how hard you work 12 and 15 hours daily. I watch how you get up and you do what you do. You think I don't appreciate that?" I said, "Mama, I promise you, I give you my word of honor. Mama, I would never bring a baby home without the father, without being legitimate. I'll never do that to you. I promise you. I promise you." And my mama looked at me. I said, "Mom, will you trust me? Will you believe me?" And my mom, she looked at me and she said, "Yes, I do." And do you know, till the day my mother died, I was childless. I never got married, so I didn't get pregnant and I didn't have any kids. But I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry because I kept my word. I didn't do that because I knew it would break my mother's heart. I knew it would break my mother's heart because her mother was 16 when her mother had the man that was her father, who never ever claimed her, impregnated a 15-year-old girl who had a baby when she was 16. And she actually thought he was going to marry her until she finds out that he's already married to somebody in New York. So he got her pregnant twice. So she had my mother and the uncle. He never acknowledged my mother or his son. And they looked just like him. They looked just like him. He never acknowledged them. My mother said he would meet them on the street. He'd be walking down the street. She says sometimes he would come to the playground and look through the fence and just stare at her at the playground. And she'd walk over to the fence and look, and he'd just look at her. And then she said, "Give me $1." And he would give her $1. And then he'd walk away. And over time, people would come up and say, "She looks just like you." And he said, "No, this is a friend of mine's baby or daughter." No. And he never acknowledged my uncle. My uncle started shooting heroin when he was 12 years old, hanging out with the boys on the street, being a street rat, a hood rat. My mother said she was coming down the street and she saw him in the alleyway shooting up. And she saw that was the first time she knew that he was a drug addict. And she kept trying to tell my grandmother, "He's doing drugs." And my grandmother would not believe her. She thought, because my grandmother was riddled with guilt, here she was with a third grade education. You understand? She had a third grade education. I say, she had a third grade education, and all she was able to do was wash dishes. And so she worked in a diner down on downtown. She worked actually, it was a lunchroom that she worked at. And so she spent years working for Mr. Eland, she used to call him. I don't know who, but anyway, my grandmother was very talented. Now she could have been an entrepreneur because she could cook the heck out of sweet potato pies and apple pies. And he said, "Yeah, Bertha, make some pies for me." and he'd give her $1 for a whole pie with all the ingredients. He didn't even buy the ingredients, and my grandmother thought it was special. He would buy the pie for $1, and then he would sell it $1 a slice. So you could understand, she wasn't business oriented at all, and this is the early 50s. Anyway, but my mom was an honorable woman. And my friends, she prayed for them years and years. And she used to send them cards. She would buy a whole bunch of uh, Hallmark cards and all these different kind of cards. And she would write scriptures in them. And she would say, "Hold on." I remember my friend Barbara had an anxiety attack when she was on the road. She was doing Les Miserables, and she was doing Cats, and she was just, oh, she was waiting on the Lord to send her somebody, and she totally got frustrated and flustered or whatever. And I told my mom, I said, she's kind of falling apart. My mom became her mom on the road. Every time, Barbara said, every time she got to a city, she had a card waiting for her, some kind of card that was waiting for her from my mom. And Barbara would say, "I don't know how she knew where I was coming." Well, my mother would talk to Barb's mother, and she would give her Barb's itinerary. So every city and town that Barbara went to, or state that Barbara went to, she had a card that greeted her. So anyway, when my mom died, I counted it really special for Barbara to read the scripture, the 91st Psalm, which was another thing that was really important to my mom. I just want to say that um, you can do little things. You don't have to do big things. You can pray for people. Everybody doesn't have to know what you're doing. You can pray. The left hand don't have to know what the right hand is doing. You can get up in the morning and have a list of people that you want to pray for. Not just your family, because God doesn't take care. He's looking out for you. So not just your family, but have the love in your heart to pray for someone else. Barbara and I were praying for this young girl who couldn't see out of her left eye, and they kept trying to find out what was wrong with her. And they found out she had gone blind. And we have been praying for her for months and months and months. And I just heard this morning that this little girl, Elena, now they're going to save her eyes. She's going to be wearing patches, and they're going to save her eyes. So it's so good to pray for people and hear that God answers prayer. And my mom, she was that person. And she used to pray for Barbara's mom all the time. And when my mother died, Barbara's mother became my mother. Virginia Nunn became my mother. And I could call her anytime and just say, "Hi, Mom, how you doing?" And Virginia Nunn, she's gone on to be with the Lord. She passed away, ovarian cancer. As she found out she had it on her 80th birthday, we were going to have I think it was a big Thanksgiving celebration, and she got sick, and we had to rush her to the hospital, and she was dead within a month or two. But she was my mom too, and I want to honor her. And I also want to mention Mrs. Ballinger, who was a wonderful neighbor next door that lived next door to us. How loving and kind that family was. So I'm not going to just keep on talking. I just want to tell you, if you have, and there was a time, I don't want to act like me and my mom's relationship was perfect, because it wasn't. I had anger at her because she stayed with my father until he left us, okay? So he was cruel. The night, what was a night or two before my father left, he was banging my head on a porcelain tub to, crack it like a cassava. Mama jumped on his back like a monkey, and gave him a what do you call it, a chokehold. And saved my life. And I was like, God, I can't take it any longer. And God was so good that I think He sent my father away. I wouldn't have the health, I would not have the healthy mind I have today if God hadn't taken my father. Sometimes people are like, I want my daddy. If I had had a daddy, I would have had a better life. You don't know that's true. You don't know that man who fathered you. You don't know what would have happened. And I asked my mother, I was so angry with her for so many years. Why? Why didn't you leave him? Why did he was abusive? Why didn't you leave him? And I used to spend my whole time waiting for my mother to tell me the truth. You ever had that thing where you keep trying to hint, you keep trying to go through some kind of thing where you want the truth to be spoken? You just got the truth. You got to know the truth. You demand the truth, and you feel like they're hiding something. I was so angry at my mom. Like, what's going on? Why did you keep us there? And I was so angry at her for years. And I used to take her. I used to go to the same church she went to, not to find Jesus, not to praise or worship. I just wanted her to tell me something. And my mother never would look me in the face because I was like a bee in your face, honey. I was like I mean, when I was little, my aunt used to say, "You used to talk so doggone much." I couldn't stand it. She said, when you were like 3 or 4, she said, you wanted to go to the bank with me. And she said, I said, no, I'm not going to take you. She said, because you're going to start talking and bother people in the bank. And I said, I ain't going to say nothing. I'll close my mouth and throw away the key. She said, okay, I'm going to take you, but don't you say anything. You understand me? I said, oh, auntie, I ain't going to say nothing. I ain't going to say nothing. She said, I got into the bank and they had those lines, they open up on Saturday morning. They opened up the bank and there were 2 lines all the way from the door all the way up to the cashier. And she said, my little self was like, because I was really, really thin then, because we were starving most of the time. I was really thin then. And so my auntie said, I looked around and people looking at me like, oh, what a cute little girl, whatever. And my aunt said, she was saying, she was looking at me and everybody was looking. And she said, all of a sudden I looked at everybody in the whole bank and said, well, hello, everybody. And she said, oh my God, everybody in the bank started laughing. And she said, I told you not to say anything. So I was a talker all my life. So my mother, I was one of those people like, hey, mom, hey, mom, hey, mom, hey, mom, hey, mom. And so my mother learned early to turn me off, not really listen to me, not even look me in the face. She just, whatever. But it wasn't that my mother didn't love me. She just didn't have time for me to be chatting her up all the time, to be bugging her. So she was a woman of few words. I told you she was shy and introspective. But I kept expecting my mother to show the kind of love that mothers are supposed to show. She didn't hug me. If you go to hug my mother, it'd be like, she'd be like a lurch, okay? Like Frankenstein. I'm like, Mom, this is not brain surgery. This is not an attack. It's just a hug. Do you mind? Just a hug. And I remember we were in the IHOP, and over the years, I was driving down Lakeshore one day, and as I'm driving down, I remember this guy who had an office next to me. He had a wife that I knew. Both of us were in theater, and she told me about how her husband was so strange because he never bought her anything, and he had brought her something from a dinner that he was at. He had attended, and he told her, "Baby, don't go to bed. I got something for you." And she was like, "Oh, what is it? What are you bringing me?" He said, "I'm bringing you something. Make sure you up so you can get it." So she was happy. She was like, "Okay." Uh, so anyway, she waited up past 12, And he came home and he looked at it. He said, I see you waited up for me. He said, got you something. He said, sit down. He sat her down at the dining room table. And she's sitting there and she's thinking she's going to get, he's going to pull out some kind of jewelry, something, whatever. And she said, she looked up and he goes, bam. And he put in front of her, it was one of those little, what do you call aluminum foil swans that they had taken his leftovers and had put it in the shape of a swan, and he put it in front of her. And she looked at it, he said, go ahead, open it, honey. She opened it, and she said when she opened it, she looked up and she said, you gave me meat? He said, baby, not just meat. Baby, this is the tenderest meat you ever have. He said, here, you can cut this with a fork, not a knife, baby. It's that tender. It's filet mignon or whatever. And she said, I thought he had brought me something. And she was like, no way, no way. Long story short, uh, she just thought it was a waste of time. So here it is. It's over. And I what she had determined was a good thing, wasn't anything special. He determined that he had done something wonderful for his wife. He didn't know that she didn't like it. And she said, I wanted him to buy me something that meant something, buy me some flowers if he was gonna give me something. She said, but me? So 2 days later, her husband said, yeah, I had this and I brought this for my baby. And he said, I brought her some meat and some filet mignon. And he said, I'm not the kind of person to buy flowers because that's the way she may like that. But I'd rather buy a blouse or something that means something. I don't believe in flowers because they die right away. And I was listening to that, and that's the way he was showing his love, okay? But she didn't get it because she wanted the love the way she wanted it. And as I was driving down Lakeshore on the way down the street, down the road, it occurred to me my mother loved me the way she could. I may not get how my mother loved me. I may not understand it, but my mother loved me. Whenever I got evicted from an apartment, I could come stay with mama. I could sleep in the dining room and bring all my stuff to her house. I could always count on my mother to be there for me. And there I was so upset, and I was in the theater, and I used to, my mother used to say, you need to do this and that. And I quit theater because my mother said I needed to get a real job. And so I stopped doing theater. I got a real job. I was waiting tables, and my feet were hurting, and my whole life just flashed in front of me, depressed all the time. And I looked at PBS one day, and I saw my friends who had stayed in theater and were now in a movie. And I was so depressed. I was crying, crying, crying. And my mother passed by the dining room and saw me crying on the floor, just depressed. And my mother said, who are you? Who are you? She said, where is my daughter? Where? I said, Mama, they weren't even as good as me. And look at them, look at them. They stayed with it, and now look what they have. And my mother said, I didn't know it meant that much to you. And she said, look, I want my daughter back. If theater is what you want to do, if writing is what you want to do, she said, I'll stand by you 100%. And my mother did that until the day she died. And let me tell you, when a mother loves you, a mother commits to you. My mother kept every clipping, every newspaper article, everything my mother could find. She loved me like that. And then finally that day when I realized I'm just going to let my mother off the hook. I'm going to stop trying to make my mother love me the way I wanted to love me. And there I was, like looking at my mom. And I said, you know what? You don't have to look at me. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to excuse yourself. I said, I know you love me, and it doesn't matter. However you love me is the way I take it. That's the way I'm going to take it. And then all of a sudden, my mother turned around and looked at me and said, you know something? All my life I've been afraid. All my life I've been scared. And she said, and look what I did. I made children who were afraid too. And she said, you and your sister, she said, I created this fear in you. And she said, I'm so sorry. She said, but the reason why I stayed with your father was because I didn't have a father. My father never acknowledged me. And she said, I wanted you to know your father no matter what. I wanted you. And she said, when he was a father, when he acted as a father and responsible as a father, she said he was a good father. And when he wasn't, he wasn't. She said, but do you remember we used to get in that rusty metal bed on Saturday mornings and watch cartoons and eat cereal? And I said, yeah, I remember. She said, that's when he was a good daddy. And she said, and he did so many good things too. And she said, I wanted you to have that because I used to pray that my father would acknowledge me. And do you know her father never did? But when I graduated from college, oh, he shows up crying like, I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, who is this man? And she said, this is my father. I looked at him like, what? Who is this man? Her father. And he was crying to my, oh, I'm so proud of you or whatever. And my mother was like, she was all jittery and everything. And this is my father, and I want you to get to know him and stuff. I was like, I don't want to know somebody who would deny his child in front of people. Don't come to me because now I got a degree and it's going to make you feel proud so you can introduce me to people. And my mother was like, send him cards, write him regularly. I don't want his money. I don't want him to die and leave me nothing. Be good to my mother. That's what I wanted. And when my mother had broken up with my father, my grandmother said, I'm going to go to your father because he's got a restaurant and he's got money. And I'm going to go to him and I'm going to ask him to give you some money to help you uh, with the children. And my mother said, don't go, don't ask him anything. He's never done anything for me. And she said, no, no, Marge, no, because he's got it to give, and I'm gonna go ask him. And she said, please let me ask him. And my mother said, okay, if you want to. And so my grandmother came back hours later, late, almost at nighttime. She came back and she walked into the room, and that kind of air that something's wrong. And my mother said, what happened? And my grandmother said, my mother said, did you see him? And she said, yeah. And she said, I told him you needed help, and I told him that you had broken up with John and you were having a hard time. And she said, and she reached in her bag and she said, he said, give you this. And he gave my grandmother, extended this dollar bill that her father, who never acknowledged her all her life, never acknowledged her brother all their lives. He gave her $1. He gave her $1. And my mother, it killed her. My mother said, he gave me $1. $1. It stuck in her craw so hard. It broke her heart. Again, and a week before my mother died, she said, she couldn't let it go. She couldn't let it go. She said, my father, I never meant anything to my father. She said, he gave me $1. $1. And that was just so sad. But my mother didn't die. Come in. My mother didn't die unhappy. Yes? No, come on in. Oh, okay, honey. Thank you. Okay, thank you. That was my neighbor. She got a box that was delivered for me. Um, but my mother never got over that hurt. not being acknowledged by your own father when you look exactly like him. That was so painful for my mom. I don't know what your stories may be. I don't know what your story may be about your mom, but I just wanted to honor my mother today, to acknowledge her as my mom, and to tell her, even today, she'd be 91, I still love my mom, and I wanted you to know something about her. And it's not perfect. She wasn't perfect. I wasn't perfect. And my mom said, uh, I just produced kids who were scared. And I said, Mom, I'm okay. I said, you didn't do anything wrong. I said, look, I know you love me, and it doesn't matter. None of it matters. I love you, and I know you love me. And the way you love me is just fine. I want to tell you, if you and your mom are not getting along and you got issues or whatever, don't give up. Keep praying to the Lord that the Lord will bring it full circle. My mom lived with me about 5 years before she died, and we became girlfriends. We became bachelorettes. So don't give up, okay? I love you and thank you for spending some time with me and my memories of my mother. So I'll talk to you later. Okay, God bless. I wonder who's on the phone.